Will they get this prompt when they join? They will, right?
It should, did you get a recording in progress thing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Then yeah, they should.
Okay. Hi, Nancy, welcome. Good morning, Nicole. Good afternoon, whatever it is now.
Hi, Barbara.
Here you are. We, it's a minute early, but we're letting people in as they arrive so that we could, so that we can get started right at 12:31. We have such amazing expertise that we don't want to waste a moment of it waiting for the crowd to join us. Okay.
Can we see the participants when you're sharing a screen or no?
If you go up to, yes, yes, I think there's a way to do it. If you go up to the top, you should see participants. Like if you hover up at the top, you'll see participants.
On
Yes.
some screens, it may be at the bottom. On my screen, it's at the bottom.
Ah,
You
okay.
click on that, the participants actually will come up on the left side or right side.
Okay. But you don't see the photos, right? The pictures.
You know,
The
at the
people.
top, there's view option, and I always exit full screen so that all of the photographs are at the top of the screen. So
Okay.
you should be able to have it. And top right-hand corner.
You do side-by-side gallery right now. I can see all 12, right where Kenny's talking about under.
Yes,
view.
side by side gallery will show you everybody.
Yeah.
Got it.
Such expertise.
Yeah, if you go to standard though, it will allow everyone to be at the top of your screen, which I find helpful because then I can view the screen and all the participants at the top.
Okay. Welcome, Heidi. Welcome, Lisa. We are going to get started. We are letting people in as they arrive because we want to get started promptly. We have a little bit of housekeeping and some thank yous to get through quickly. But we really want to preserve as much of the hour as we possibly can for the discussion led by our panel of speakers and then going into the workshop portion, which will be much more interactive. So we are ready to roll here. Hello, for those of you that don't know me, and I think there may be one or two. I extend to you a warm welcome to all of you, our Crew New York speakers, and some special guests. Housekeeping items, as I mentioned before we begin. As already prompted when you joined, this event is being recorded. It will be posted on Crew New York's YouTube channel and the link distributed to all registrants in the next week or so. Please turn your video on if you're comfortable doing so. Seeing faces rather than names only is certainly more welcoming. If you have not already done so, also, please rename yourself with your first, last, and company name so we know who you are. This is particularly important during the workshop portion. Before getting down to business, I must quickly recognize and thank Crew New York sponsors for their longstanding loyalty and generous support of Crew New York. They enable us to serve you, our members. There are way too many for me to single them all out today, but I do want to highlight our Zenith and Gold level sponsors, Fidelity National Title Group, CBRE, Kimco Realty, and Schrepp. Crew New York extends its appreciation as well to its first ever diversity champions and these past Crew New York presidents who generously donated to our past president's scholarship fund for 2022. And I think a couple of you may be on. On behalf of Crew New York, thank you for joining us for an assuredly content-rich discussion among our speakers on the development life cycle, focusing today on the design construction phase of that life cycle. Today's panel of amazing Crew New York members, all leaders and rising stars in their respective life cycle roles, will certainly yield insightful observations, pragmatic guidance, and thoughtful synergies and opportunities, we hope, for all. But first, a brief bit about today's program. Today's program represents a collaboration between our legacy leaders and member engagement and empowerment committees. It is part of a series on the development life cycle, with the next one focusing on finance and investment on September 14th. Many of our members play some role in the development life cycle, but may not fully understand where they fit in the bigger development picture, where there are potential synergies with other development professionals amongst our membership, and what are the emerging opportunities for one and all in the life cycle. So this new series aims to bridge some of those gaps by affording the benefits of the collective wisdom and experience of today's panel and future panels, followed by the workshop portion, in which we hope you will actively engage in a facilitated discussion with our speakers to delve into those opportunities, synergies, and knowledge acquisition. So I distributed this yesterday. Hopefully you got it. As many of you know, the real estate development is a multi-phase process that can be complicated, lengthy, and risky. The development life cycle chart I have up on the screen now is not, the be all end all. You can see various versions and iterations of it, but it does represent what we believe are the main phases of the development life cycle, as well as many, but not all, of the professionals who play a role in some aspect of the development life cycle. It often takes years, as you all know, or at least some of you know, depending on where you fit within this circle. It often takes years to bring a project from the initial concept and feasibility assessment through its planning, design, and construction phases to final completion. There are numerous challenges to overcome along the way, and many of you are involved in supporting your companies or your clients in overcoming those challenges. So why does anybody do it? Development projects also can be highly profitable investment opportunities because they deliver a product that does not then exist, often providing fresh new supply to satisfy pent-up market demand. They can truly and tangibly transform neighborhoods, communities, cities, and even states, as we have all seen, as well as the environment itself, particularly going forward with sustainability and other changes and adaptations the industry will be making, in my opinion. When executed well, addressing project risks cost effectively, a development project can yield an attractive return on the investment, translating into a runaway success story. To do so, investors must successfully assess the risks associated with a development project by better understanding its life cycle. Generally speaking, two factors typically play a big role in the risk of a given project: the project type, ranging from build to suit to speculative and all that's in between, and its stage at any given time. As shown in this graph, the project type can determine the steepness of the risk curve across the project life cycle. As each step in a development project life cycle is completed, overall project risk generally incrementally abates. As more projected potential obstacles are resolved and unknowns are addressed, there is greater certainty around project execution, costs, and scheduling. So with that very, very preliminary overview, I turn you over to Madeline Kirsch, President, Sun and Moon Marketing and Communications, who will facilitate the discussion among our panelists. Madeline is not only part of the team which developed this series, but she plays a crucial role herself in the development life cycle. Please note the opinions expressed by our panelists today are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of their respective companies. And finally, audience, please post any questions you have for the speakers in chat as they go. As many of these as possible will be addressed during the workshop portion. I know we've got a robust group of thoughtful professionals here today, so don't be shy, post your questions, but do keep yourself on mute until the workshop period. With that, I turn it over to Madeline.
All right, thank you, Barbara. It's nice to be here with everybody today. We do have a great lineup of speakers, and I'm happy to introduce them quickly. Alphabetical order, starting with Leah Blackman, who recently moved up the ladder at at her firm and is now the New York division manager for hospitality design and construction at CM&B. So congratulations and welcome. Deborah Ferriman, who is a double threat, being both a CPA and an attorney, and is currently general counsel for Beachwold Residential. She will tell us more about what she does. Claire Gondon, who is a project manager for Brooklyn Tower for JDS Development in downtown Brooklyn, mixed use project. Claire also is a NYU Real Estate Institute graduate and a former Merle Gross Ginsburg scholar. So we're really pleased that she is so active in crew. And finally, Jessica Jeffrey, who is an owner's rep, which a term that many of us may not be familiar with, and works for Macro, which is a Savills company. So welcome, ladies. As Barbara said, development is a high risk, high return business. Everybody wants to be a developer one way or another. And from a developer's perspective, really, they're interested in two things, right? Maximizing value and minimizing risk. All of us are involved in one way or another. So we'll start out by asking each of you to tell us a little bit about your role for your company and how and where it fits in the development life cycle. So why don't we go alphabetically, and now we'll start with Leah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leah Blackman. Hopefully you can hear me okay. It's great to see so many familiar faces. I'm with CM&B Construction Management and Builders. We're at the construction and design end of the life cycle. Although, you know, I look at that circle and I see us being involved in, you know, practically every area, because what we're really doing for our clients is helping to create a predictable outcome. You know, developers care primarily about cost and schedule, making sure that their project is delivered on time and on budget. So in my role, you know, as Madeline mentioned, I was recently promoted to division manager of our New York region. We're a Boston-based company. I still have a very active role in business development, working with all of our clients, end users and developers alike. And now responsible additionally for growing our team, attracting the right talent, and making sure that we are delivering for our clients. It's great to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Leah. Moving on, Deborah, you work for a residential developer, and I think you have lots of other components to your job as well.
Yes, so I am Debbie Farraman. I'm Associate General Counsel for Beachwold Residential, which is an owner operator of mostly multifamily complexes, and also Alpine Residential, which is a ground up developer of, again, mostly multifamily with mainly there's some type of a retail component as well. I just joined about 6 months ago. Before that, I worked at a large law firm, so it's definitely been a change. My job really is the entire life cycle, you know, from inception until completion, whenever that might be. I'm involved in all phases. A lot of it has to do with managing the risk, you know, through the documentation process, negotiating terms, negotiating, you know, with various parties, with other attorneys, with consultants, with banks, with anyone you can really imagine. So a lot of my day is spent talking to people, talking to my own client to figure out what their vision is and what is an acceptable risk for our company, and figuring out how to balance that and shuffle that with the other parties that we interface with.
Thank you. Claire, tell us about what you do on a daily basis and Brooklyn Tower.
Hi, my name is Claire Gondon. I'm a project manager with JDS Development, and JDS is a developer who self-performs. And so by doing so, we're able to really control the cost and schedule of our projects. I'm part of the project team for the Brooklyn Tower, who is responsible for the construction of the project. And so the project is a ground up mixed use development in downtown Brooklyn. There are 93 stories and construction budget is $500 million. And in my day-to-day, I am responsible for hiring and managing contractors, and I also manage designers in the construction of the project.
Thank you. And finally, last but not least, Jessica, who's an owner's rep. Tell us a little bit about an owner's rep and how that fits into the development cycle.
Yeah, thanks, Madeline. So as Leah had touched on before, as an owner's rep, we really do kind of also touch on the full life cycle of a property. So we would be involved as early as you have a site and you don't know what to do with it, or you're trying to locate a site, and we can end as late as you're implementing a new program and you need to roll that out with your internal stakeholders, or you're moving into a project. And so owners reps, we're really employed by our clients to help supplement internal groups that they may have. We also have subject matter experts that they may not have internal that they would like to employ. And our real big job is to mitigate risk by informing the client and, really keeping them up to speed on latest market trends and, connecting them with relationships in either design firms or CM firms globally.
Thank you. So one of the questions that we have is how we all work together. And I'd like each of you to talk a little bit about the other kinds of professionals that you deal with in the development life cycle and how that process works. Yeah, we can go alphabetically again, Leah.
I was going to say, I'm happy to go first. Similar to what Jessica just said, echoing that, we're often brought in by the owner's rep. They're often looking for a construction partner early on in the process. We also work with design professionals, interior designers, architects, civil engineers, MEP engineers. Those are the biggies. But like I mentioned in my introduction, we are often hired by the developer, but sometimes the end user. We do primarily retail work, although we have a growing industrial practice as well. So, for example, we did a bunch of work over at Brookfield's Manhattan West development on the west side, and were hired by Union Square Hospitality Group to build their restaurant, which was funded by Brookfield. So it's, very, hits many, many parts of the life cycle.
Do you find that budgets change when the construction company gets involved in it? Does the work that you do impact the design and the other professionals, that everybody has a view of things, and then when we find out how much it costs or how it's going to cost, it sometimes changes?
Absolutely. We prefer to be hired as early in the process as possible so that we can get out ahead of some of those issues. We're often hired to come in during pre-construction so that designers don't have to go back to the drawing board and value engineer, when they're already in construction documents. It's much easier for everyone and saves a lot of money when it can happen along the way.
Yeah, and to echo and just jump on what Leah said there, part of, as an owner's rep, our job is, will it be involved in sometimes guiding the client on whether or not to use a developer or to go straight to a construction services. And part of our strategy is informing the stakeholders as to the risks and the benefits to bringing in different consultants and design teams and construction teams to inform the budget and schedule. Earlier is always better than later. You have more time to pivot if you have more runway than if you don't.
What kinds of companies would hire an owner's rep? Would a tenant do that? Would a developer do that? Who employs your company?
Typically, it would be an owner, so somebody who owns the property and may employ a developer or a construction manager. Also, tenants will. They may be negotiating a lease and they're not really informed internally on how to do that. We can help supplement those services and help. Sometimes it could be a developer, it could be a law firm, it could be a construction management firm who is looking for a way to roll out a new program and wants to understand internally all the different stakeholders and what their desires and needs are. And we are a funnel to take in all the data and information and better inform the leadership team who's making the decisions.
So COVID must have had a big impact on you these days, as it has on all of us. But
It did. It just also then changed a bit of the way we worked, right? We all know real estate didn't go away. It just had to very much adapt to the current situation. So we all kind of were a little bit, finding our sea legs again. And then you saw a lot of, maybe it's not necessarily new construction, it's repurposing construction or finding how their space can work better for them. Or, hey, people aren't coming in the office as much, we need to downsize, but there's still a need to analyze and how to be efficient and cost effective.
thank you.
If I can jump in.
Yep.
So what's a little different from my point of view, my perspective is where I come in the development life cycle, we already have a design in place and we also already have a lender. And so the budget that comes with the project is already established and very much defined. And this is what I have to work with. And regardless of anything changing in the project and all the unforeseen conditions, I have to make it work with the budget that is not changing. And so this is also how, I bring in value by reviewing all of these new conditions or existing conditions and finding solutions that will be done within the budgets.
For my role, actually, I've been in various phases. Right now, I'm in the phase where we actually generate the budget. So all I hear all day is we have to change the model. The model has to change. We can't get this for this price. So like all I hear is about modeling. So starting the budget, over time, that budget continues to change all the way up until, we get a lender, we get investors, and the lender and investors want to have some type of confidence that the budget is what the budget is. And that's interesting from my former life at a law firm where the budget was basically already established. So representing developers or even equity investors, I spent my time, fighting with them with what happens if the budget's blown, who's going to pay for that, who's going to put in more money, fighting with the lenders about, are they able to review cost increases and what are they going to be able to review? So it's interesting. I started sort of at the end and now I'm back at the beginning and going through to the very end, when all of a sudden your budget will be your operating budget and no longer a construction budget.
So the question, everybody's hearing a lot about supply chain these days. So to the extent that the budget is the budget and who's going to pay for cost overruns, what happens when the supply chain gunks up and we can't get what we need? Claire, Debbie, Leah, what happens when we can't get what we need when we need it? The implication both from a time and a cost perspective. How are you finding that's impacting you these days?
It's definitely challenging, absolutely. And everything is more expensive to build right now, and shortage on material is very much real. And so we get stuff to the job site that we are going to use for construction right away. And that's making all the planning very difficult. But at the same time, what that means is we have to anticipate so much more. So all the lead time is like drastically increased, and from fabrication to shipping. And so that means that for anything that we need in months from now, we are making sure that we're securing the material at a certain rate today. So it is a lot of heavy planning and yes, dealing with price increases like all the time. So it's we have to rethink some of the details that we had. In approved and making adjustments as we go so that we keep it in the budgets.
One of my favorite phrases in development is value engineering. I think that is a wonderful little euphemism in terms of just make it cost less money. I'm going to ask each of you who, to the extent that you have to value engineer at each phase of the process, either for a lender's perspective or for a return perspective, or just as a practical matter, who are you finding is responsible for that? And is that also a negotiation amongst various professionals?
We find it's a negotiation. It's never one party. There are different parts of the cycle. It may change as who's the primary responsible for managing that process, but overarching, you've got to have the design team, the owner, and the CM and the subcontractors all on the same page about what that value engineering is. Otherwise, you end up with gaps, and finding the problem in the field is always the most expensive and the most time impact. So that's the highest risk, right? So, we advocate a value engineering throughout every step of the process. When you're talking about what your program is, really talk about what it is and what your optionality is there. Once you're in design, at every touch point, talking with a construction expert or, other experts that you need, if it's legal, because you're debating which kind of project you'd like to build on site, if that's still a question, in your phasing options. And then as you go through the design phase, we would advocate it's not best to do it at the end. That leaves you less flexibility. You're best to do it throughout and leave yourself the optionality to pivot, to be able to absorb as much as you can things that are happening in the market, the long leads, and it really forces decisions to be made timely.
Deborah, what are you finding in the negotiations?
I think that what I've learned over the years, and even more specifically now that I'm in-house, I work with many more parties than I had when I was at a law firm. But the truth is that at the end of the day, everyone's interests sort of have to be aligned to get a project built. And it really depends on what phase we're in. So for example, we have one project in Long Island that we thought we, had it hammered out, and we had a budget and we had a model. And then the town came back and said, yeah, we approved you for 170 units, but we can only give you 100 and you can only build 150. Well, now that doesn't make sense for our costs anymore. So I think like the value engineering is very specific to the project and the phase that it's in. And I think I try to always approach things from how do we align everyone's interest? If there's no money, we can't pay the contractors. If the contractors aren't going to pay, they're not going to want to perform. So I think my job in all of this is to get everyone to be reasonable and to have the same vision and document it in such a way so that, people aren't digging in their heels, but trying to come up with practical solutions in, a time when everything is a little bit different than most have experienced.
I want to pivot just a little bit because Leah's had an interesting background and started a company called Brave Chicken, which I thought was a pretty good name for a company. But she was an entrepreneur in this field, which is not so easy. And I wondered if you'd like to share a little bit about that with us.
Sure. You can thank my husband for the name. It was Chicken was a childhood nickname. And I had been, my career started in hospitality when I moved to New York 20 years ago on the owner side. And then I went to the design side and was at the same firm, iCrave, for 11 years running the business. And I had my first child and needed greater flexibility and autonomy, but felt that I really needed a clear head to figure out my next move, and felt that it would be best if I did my own thing and started consulting on my own. And one morning I was going to work and my husband convinced me to leave my job and just take the leap. And he said, go on, Brave Chicken, you can do it. and that was the name. And I worked on my own for a few years, and CM&B actually became my client. I met them because they were building a food hall for us in Lower Manhattan when I was working at iCrave. So I worked with designers, developers, contractors, mostly connecting these companies with new clients, new accounts, and doing mostly business development. And, a number of years later, CM&B offered me a full-time job in deep pandemic and felt like, now was as good a time as any. So, yeah.
Well, we're gonna wrap up our final thing, talking a little bit about the future before we turn it over to Kenny and the workshop component of it. We hear a lot about AI and automation and technology and how the future is going to be different from the present. I'll ask each of you to kind of look into your crystal balls a little bit and tell us what you think the future holds from the perspective of what you do. Debbie, why don't you?
Something that I start seeing here with our designers is how they come to the construction site and they have all the the data, the details in their tablet, iPad, or whatever it is, and they're able to project each of the layers, each of the components of the construction, and how they get assembled and what it looks like from that angle, looking at the site. So yeah, you're looking at like bare concrete, and you can see the walls being laid out and what all the layers are by kind of just looking through the tablet and like looking around. It's pretty much amazing. And obviously this is still like being developed, but as this is developed even further, it would be such a great help to anyone in contractors in understanding the coordination between all the trades and how a detail on paper gets built in the field. So this is things that we start seeing here.
That's a real risk management benefit. To be able to see through the walls before there are walls there.
And pivoting off what Claire has mentioned, a lot of technology has evolved in the last 20 years, right? As I came from the owner side before coming to an owner's rep firm, and we really looked at ways we could be informed by what's behind the wall. We have involvement beyond the project turning over. So you may have occupants, or you may be selling a property, and by having programs and systems that come in and take photographs during the construction, so that your as-built drawings may not be 100% correct, but a photograph typically can't lie. So, you can see what's there before you break open a wall and disturb somebody who's occupying the space. Safety, they use a lot of it too. You can have cameras that are now checking to make sure, for security, and also just safety to reinforce that, everyone should be employing the same safety rules on the job site. We use a lot of BIM, which is really just a 3D modeling, looking at how things really fit together, where 2D can't necessarily do all of that, and it does its best, but 3D and being able to walk through the space, you can kind of see how it's working and mitigate something when you walk the space physically and go, oh crap, it doesn't work. That's not going to be good for us in the end, and that leads to construction issues, schedule, costs, and everything like that.
Debbie, what's coming down the pike for you?
I mean, in the legal profession, I would say that the only, technology stuff is just better visuals, to be able to see what is actually being built and anticipate, predict problems, whether it's with the surrounding neighbors or, consultants and contractors. In terms of, on the development side, I think that's kind of above my pay grade at this point, how they're rolling out AI and stuff like that. But it definitely is an interesting question.
Are people going to fight less in the future?
No, never.
And Leah, how about you? What do you see happening?
So we did a pilot with open space. I don't know if anybody's used that technology, and we're rolling it out to all of our job sites now. And it provides real-time footage of what's happening on the job site, which helps a ton with risk mitigation. And frankly, just, the fact that we have projects all over the Northeast, and we have a superintendent on every job site, but it allows the project executives and senior leadership to see what's going on real time on the projects without physically being there. So that's been huge for us, and will be huge in the coming year.
So I'm sorry to interject, Madeline, we just have the time for one more quick question or observation.
Okay. Just very quickly, each of you, what kind of challenges are you facing today? Do the lightning round here.
Right.
What's the biggest challenge today?
I think finding the right talent and having the right talent and people.
James.
Yeah, exactly.
Supply chain here.
Supply chain?
Yes.
I think mine for right now is time. I mean, we're so fortunate and blessed that we have so many projects that we're being invited to look at, and so much going on that just keeping everything straight and being fortunate enough to be awarded these projects is definitely been a challenge, but that's a good challenge to have.
Great. Well, thank you all. I appreciate your joining us. And with that, I will turn it back over.
Yes, but because our speakers are by no means going anywhere. Let's see, where are we? We are going to now launch with Kenny Shepard as the facilitator of the workshop portion of today's program. This is new for us, so we need your full engagement and your patience. But what this is rather than an extended Q&A period, we want this to be a robust discussion among each of you in the audience with Madeline and the speakers as well, to talk about what you're doing in the life cycle, some of what you're seeing, what do you need from a business perspective, et cetera. But I will let Kenny address that. Kenny Shepard is principal of Kenny Shepard Interior Design Architecture, PLLC. She also was one of the team developing today's program, and like Madeline, it also plays a vital role in the development life cycle. So please do be proactive, as we all know you can be. You represent a nice cross section of the industry and should be able to share some interesting insights with each other and the panel. Kenny, why don't you kick it off while I just remind everybody about the development life cycle graphic, who's there, where they often fit, not always, as you just heard, and take it away.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you to all of the panelists. It was a really fascinating, well-informed conversation. What I'd like to start off with, we don't really have any questions at the moment, but what I'd like to start off is if everybody could go into chat and just put your name and where you fit into the development life cycle. I mean, we know where some of you fit because it's obvious that JJ Falk is with the design portion, as is Heidi. But some of the others, we don't have that information. So I think it would be very good to just have that as a background. But also, as Barbara was saying, we'd like to actually open this conversation up to the members of the audience. And let's really start where Madeline started, which is really with risk reward. What are our audience members seeing from a design point? Let's just maybe focus on design. What are you seeing right now as the biggest risk in terms of design and also the biggest reward? So I may, if I don't see a hand raised, I may call on somebody.
I was going to say, you feel perfectly free to use that option, Kenny.
I will. And so I'll start off with JJ, since she was part of the planning panel on this. JJ, tell us about some of the biggest risks you're seeing for your firm in terms of design.
Well, hi, JJ Falk. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So anyway, I think the challenge is continuing from the beginning when we see, the developers are suffering or investors are suffering or any kind of difficulties comes in, we all have challenges. But in design point of view, I happen to have some investors or building owners or the building, the representatives and all experience that they earlier stage having a designers to invited that evaluating their assets. I think designer meaning architects and engineers in whole group, but it makes the really changes and the impact like what previous speakers says. The earlier the better to having participated and then their goals and earlier so that we can be able to make a, little pivots makes difference in budget. Little pivots that makes a difference of your schedules, because depends on what supplies are available in a short time of period, or all that is going to be their experience and contribution. So yes, it is, to me, last 3 years has been pretty interesting, that lots of landlord and the tenant point of view, it just really having a difficult to finalize their decisions. And we kind of, play with them as a team and make sure that all the experience of list, whatever we have worked on, to get get them to be shared on the table. So the more we meet, the more discuss, it has always been a better, to the benefit for the life cycle that they are looking for. But any case, that is our sort of, slice of our lore and earlier stage.
Thank you, JJ.
Yeah.
Heidi, I'm going to jump to you again. As an architect working with a major architectural firm, what are the risks that you're encountering right now, the concerns?
What we're finding is that there are so few, good, clean, open sites for new buildings. So we are going further out into the boroughs, into weird places, over building on railroad tracks, what have you, to put up new buildings. And a lot of people, a lot of the projects are starting to get much more, or at least the communities that we're building in are starting to get much more interested in what is happening. And so whether it's from the landmark side of things, whether it's city agencies or state agencies that have jurisdiction over a site, nothing is clean as of right, just go and do it anymore, that there's so many more facets of people that are impacting the design of the project very early on, the massing of it, the size of it, the scale of it, the financials, that it really, it's in our best interest to really understand all of those outside forces, not just the developer themselves, and work with them to come up with a solution that is effective for everybody.
I'm going to jump in and just ask Heidi whether or not in the community engagement process, you're finding that you need to reconceive projects more than once in order to satisfy development needs. And what is the developer, when do they know to walk away, and when do they hold them, when do they fold them?
Nobody's walked away. The stakes are pretty high once they have bought a site and start the design process. But it really does take a strong stomach to get through, whether it's a landmarks or BSA approval or a ULURP process to rezone a site. You have to have fairly deep pockets to go through that process. But most of our folks are getting through it. And yes, there is a lot of design input that happens, and it does go for a few rounds before everyone can get on board with it.
Do we have other designers? I see Pat Hildebrandt has joined us, and you're involved in the design side as a mechanical HVAC engineering firm. And I think it's also one of the risks that many projects are facing today are really involving environmental sustainability. Energy is at the forefront of concern for all projects in terms of energy reduction. What is your role as an engineer in terms of reducing risk? You have to unmute yourself.
First of all, we're full MEP engineer. So we cover 3 different disciplines: mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection. We are not as active as some other engineers in the energy assessments. We have done energy audits. We have done certainly condition assessments, feasibility studies to assess the existing equipment and what its life what life is left in the equipment, or if the equipment that is there will be able to adapt to the new program that's being discussed. If it's new construction, and depending on the type of site, we do not, there is a civil portion usually, or a geotechnical portion. That's not us. That would be like a Langen, but we do work with them in assessing the site and what is around the site and how it may affect getting the proper services to that site for the whatever new construction is going up. So very often we're brought in to do assessments like this and work very closely with the architect and the developer on coming up with the different options, different concepts to address the needs that they are trying to meet.
Yeah, when would somebody bring you on board, and who would it be? Would it be the developer? Would it be the owner, the architect? And at what point would somebody actually bring an HVAC or MEP engineer into a project?
It depends on the project. We've been brought in by owners. We've been brought in by architects. We've been brought in by owners' reps. We just did a submission for a particular project that it's going to be part of the master planning for an entire industry area. We haven't, it's just been submitted. We don't have it yet, but that's the type of thing. So it really varies on what the project is and who, I mean, the developer, we have never really gone aggressively to work with developers. We typically were working with owners reps, architects, and so they know us better than the developers do. So in that case, I find now that since we're doing a lot of design build work, we're being brought in very, very early. And it's the best because that gives us an opportunity to bring things that might be a problem, note this to them and say ways to address this would be A, B, and C. And, you know, really put all the information at the hands of the people who are making the decisions, whether it's the owner, the developer, or the architect.
So risk assessment is really part of that early on.
Mm-hmm.
And value engineering. I mean, your work is already impacted by value engineering.
Yes, and as someone mentioned before, the supply chain, it's greatly affecting everything that's being done now. If they want to have certain types of equipment, if they want to have certain types of energy assessment equipment so they can meet the upcoming goals that are being legislated now, they really have to look, they have to deal with someone who knows this. If we don't know the equipment, we find the people who do and we bring them in and we help them assess what is the best way to go and what they will need, because they're probably going to have to order something like this a year in advance, 6 months in advance. It's these things really will make a tremendous difference in how the project is run all the way through.
And Kenny, if I can pivot off of Pat,
Sure,
I had a question, you know, because we talked earlier about the long lead items and just supply and demand being so not in everybody's favor these days. You know, do engineering firms, design firms, are you guys building yourself in flexibility to, I mean, we've seen on the design side that there's flexibility built in to allow pivoting for whatever the marketplace may be when the space opens. But from an engineering perspective, you know, if you spec a certain manufacturer for a piece of equipment, do you build in that that equipment could be switched out with a different manufacturer, a different type, because of, you know, the construction can take a few years and that product may not be available, or it may have, technology may have evolved. You know, are you advising your clients to maybe spend a little bit of premium dollar to have the flexibility to even switch from gas to electric, or, you know, to be able to get a shorter lead time product or certain technologies that you see coming down the pike?
Well, every time that we do any kind of assessment, on systems or to suggest the appropriate systems for the programming that is being done on the project. We look at a number of different options because something can always happen, as you're saying. And we need to know what will work, how it will work, how it will fit in with the other equipment, how the owner is going to be able to maintain this equipment. And we need to know what will be some of the downfalls or the shortfalls of it, and look for all different kinds of things. I mean, all through COVID, we were doing a great deal of this for clients, a lot for Health and Human Hospitals in a number of their locations. In fact, we did those assessments in every H&H hospital in the Bronx and in Manhattan. And we literally, I mean, there were times that they just could not afford something. And so we had to come up with other options, certainly not as good, but other options that they could do something to, say, increase the outside air, to make it appropriate for the environment, because it's a healthcare environment. So we really have to look at a number of different manufacturers. We have to look at a number of different products and rate them for them. And one may fall outside their budget, but it may be the best solution. But then we have to come up with others that will be available and or fall in with their budget.
Great, thank you, Pat. I'm going to just stay with the design aspect before we switch maybe to owners reps, but I see Jess Friskia from Langen is here. And I'm wondering, first of all, if you could turn on your camera and if you'd be willing to talk to us a little bit about what Langen as an environmental engineering today is facing in projects. I mean, you really would be coming in at the very beginning of projects in terms of site evaluation.
Right, yeah. Specifically where I'm at, I'm in the environmental discipline, but I work very closely with our geotechs and our site civils. So, you know, we're pretty much there. We also have environmental planners, honestly, so we can start even before that, especially if it's, let's say, an affordable housing and it's got HUD financing or HPD and it requires an EIS. So yeah, we start from the very beginning through foundations. And yeah, it's definitely interesting seeing the different.
What are some of the biggest issues right now for owners, developers facing, especially, I mean, if you're taking a site ground up, which in Manhattan is increasingly rare, but outside in the boroughs, outside of the city, what are some of the major issues that they're facing in terms that impact the risk reward on their projects?
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing less in Manhattan, but that's also a function of what I do, which is a lot of brownfields work, and there's only so many brownfields left in Manhattan, plus the incentivization of the BCP is pretty low when you work in a place like Manhattan. It's the further out you go, the more disadvantaged communities, you're going to get more bang for your buck on a brownfield project out there. So we're seeing a lot of like land use, I would say, issues. You know, for example, we have a site in Crown Heights that's been held up by a restraining order because of the nearby site by the Botanic Garden. So like the whole general area, they can't see. It's been years now that we've been on this project and we're just waiting to break ground. So that's definitely a concern. And as these delays mount, it's, you know, the financing for that was done pre-COVID. And we still aren't in the ground. So, you know, the cost of steel in that time frame increasing so much is another major issue for a lot of these developers. So, you know, hoping that the land issues get resolved quickly helps with the fact that the price of everything else is going up.
And
Kenny, I'm sorry. Do you mind if I just do a follow up with Jess? Something
I'm
interested in.
Absolutely, totally.
Jess, I know Langen is worldwide, and I'm just curious whether you're finding the regulatory environment here in New York is directly discouraging new development here in New York and encouraging it elsewhere. Where we had our leading ladies last week at which Marianne Gilmartin spoke, and they have a brand new deal in Baltimore. And she said they're seeing that the regulatory reception is dramatically different and they're loving it.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a planner, so I don't want to speak completely out of turn, but I do think it's interesting that in my time in this field it's been over 10 years now. I started out under the Bloomberg administration, and one of our projects that was the first residential development along the Gowanus Canal would not be possible under the de Blasio administration because of the zoning issues. Under Bloomberg, you could get just like 2 tax lots to be rezoned from manufacturing to residential, commercial, mixed use. That ended pretty much as soon as de Blasio came into office, where we had to have full neighborhood rezoning. So, and a lot of that got, locked up through the ULUP process and into the city council approvals. I mean, pretty much all the ones that he wanted went through, but, with a lot of pushback. And so it took longer. And so, is there resistance on the regulatory side? Yeah, I'm not going to speak to whether or not it's a good or bad thing, but that definitely is part of the reason why, developers may have issues accessing certain areas. And from my perspective, a lot of those areas getting rezoned are brownfields. They're ripe with, tax incentives as soon as you, start talking about cleanup and redevelopment. So there is that aspect. And, then on top of that, you have the DEC who is cracking down on what sites are even allowable to get those credits. So it's both the city and the state that we've seen changes over the last, 8 years.
Thank you. Before, we're also approaching the end of the hour. So first of all, I'm wondering, do we have anybody else who's involved in the design aspect, whether it's architectural, environmental, MEP, who would like to just share their experiences, what they're facing right now in terms of risk reward, and what their biggest challenges are in terms of bringing a development project to the market?
Come on. You're not shy. I know you're not shy.
Yeah. Who do we have? Okay. I do see that Lisa, is it Mu? M-U-I. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name, but I see that you're an owner's rep. So we've heard from Jessica. I really would like to hear your what you're experiencing in today's market, if you're willing to share with us, and what the major risks and rewards that you're seeing for your clients.
Wow. So hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Moy. I'm a senior project manager here at Macro. I work with Jessica. She's my director. And unlike Jessica, I came from the owner side before I joined the owner's rep side. And the biggest risk factor, which we are seeing right now, is that we have our projects are relatively large, and they take years and years of planning. And so you have all these design team, like consultants, GC, CM, even the stakeholders, the clients themselves. Decisions are constantly changing. Plans are also constantly changing. But then the lead factor of getting to, point, like going through due diligence, entitlement, and then actually breaking ground. There's so much time that people might change their thought process, or for example, going through COVID. Now, instead of building this beautiful corporate campus, now you have to design, you have to completely redesign everything for a hybrid environment. And so our biggest risk and reward really is to manage the process of decision changing for whatever reason. And obviously the budget, as Claire kept saying in her Brooklyn Tower building, you have a budget. Everyone is married to this budget. What can you do in terms of either value engineering or talking to your representative to make sure that we can still deliver a product that everyone's happy with, but within the budget in mind? So that's the biggest risk that we're seeing. It's time and money.
Kenny, I'm sorry, just one more time for one more quick question.
Okay, so I'm going to, and again, I'm going from the chat, Erica Mulligan is with JB&B. So we're going to go back into design, again, MEP design. So Erica, do you mind sharing with us some of the trends you're seeing today in terms of mechanical engineering, certainly response to environmental energy requirements, some of the biggest risks that you're seeing on your projects? And if you could turn your camera on so we could see you.
Sure. I'm sorry, I'm mobile.
Okay, no
so
problem.
I'm just going to be a voice. I apologize. In terms of the environmental side of things, we've really, we're involved in Local Law 97, carbon reduction. So we've done numerous studies on that and starting now to implement those in new designs moving forward.
And what are you seeing? What do you see as the biggest concern of your clients right now in terms of bringing a new project to market? Are you mostly involved in renovation or new building construction? Because they're very different life cycles.
They are. It's a little bit of both. So like I said, the biggest challenge is so what we would do is we would do a study and kind of educate our clients on kind of like the incentives, right, is doing so, and when kind of penalties start to come in and stuff like that, and kind of leave it up to them of when they think in terms of their finances they can go for these upgrades. But we've more so done for new buildings, not to say that we haven't done for existing just yet.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. And thank all of you for participating, all of the audience members along with the panelists.
Yes, terrific job, Kenny, and everybody. We appreciate you really engaging in the conversation, and would also appreciate any suggestions you have to make our next workshop even better. But last and certainly never least, want to say thank you to our panelists, our fabulous speakers today, Leah Blackman, Deborah Fairmont, Claire Gondon, and Jessica Jeffrey. Amazing job, ladies. Also, however, we must thank our event team because they've been working on this for a long time, and a lot more goes into this than you may think. And so we have Viviana Otto, me, Maria Elefante, who is the chair of one of the hosting committees, Legacy Leaders, JJ Falk, Madeline Kirsch, as you know, and Kenny Shepard, as you know. Finally, thank you, our wonderful audience. I echo Kenny's appreciation of your engagement. I hope to see you in September at our event, Development Lifecycle, focusing on investment and finance, and which will certainly touch upon those risk factors that we've discussed and how to manage them from a cost perspective. Stay safe, be happy, and successful with your crew, everybody. Take care. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.